So basically, in LATAM, what we say is there's no single path to raise money, right? And I was just having lunch with a founder that wants to go right away and raise like, I don't know, crazy amounts of money. Some people prefer to bootstrap. Some people prefer to raise as least as possible until they validate the key hypothesis, right? And so what we see is basically three different paths, but two main paths, right? We'll call this one path A, right? Path A is basically maybe you raise some friends and family at the beginning, maybe bootstrapped a little bit, but basically the first time you go out and raise external capital, you raise what we call a pre-seed round, right? And this can have different sizes in terms of total proceeds, right? In Brazil, usually they're a bit bigger. In the US, they're definitely bigger, but we're talking about LATAM. I would say a rule of thumb for an average is around 500K, you know? It could be 300, it could be 800K, but let's talk about 500K as a rule of thumb for a pre-seed, right? Usually raised from angels, angel networks like, you know, hardware angels or, you know, like university angels or former company employee angel networks. And then micro funds or pre-seed funds like Latitud, for instance. Also accelerators, of course, right? YC would come in here, for instance. Usually, not always, but usually. And we'll talk about valuation later, but usually the teams dilute, I would say, try to dilute closer to a 10%. 10%. Some of them manage to dilute less, like around 5%. But I would say we usually see them getting diluted between 10 to 15. I would say ideally don't dilute beyond 10%. And what do founders usually do with this money? This is usually on a PowerPoint, right? And they go out and validate the key hypothesis, right? They build the very early team, the core team, they build the MVP, and they validate key hypothesis. Okay, they go and say, okay, my thesis is that the market needs this solution for this problem, right? Let's go and test it out with the market. Let's see if the demand actually agrees with me, with the thesis I have in my brain. And this might sound stupid, but I've seen many times that very experienced founders that maybe even bring an unfair insight from their previous job, or they really think that the market needs a certain solution. Of course, it's the demand then says, you know what? It's not really this what I need. It's this, but 3 degrees to the right, right? And I'm not willing to pay for this, or like with a take rate, but I want to pay a SaaS, right? So what they do is basically they validate key hypotheses. Usually they don't get to product market fit. I'm talking about initially validating some key hypothesis with some pilot users. And then usually after 12 months, 24 months, sometimes it's closer to 12, to be honest. Sometimes less. They go out and raise what we call a large seed or a sizable seed, right? Which is, it could be, again, a bit below that. It could be from 2 million. But to be more clear here, we talk about 2.5 million plus, right? And usually here, they're taking around 20% dilution, right? Which is the rule of thumb for a series, for a seed round, also for a Series A. And here, hopefully, the plan you'll be pitching seed funds, right? So both early seed funds and late seed funds. So we'll talk about types of funds later, but early seed funds, like smaller seed funds, but also you could be pitching here the larger seed funds. Why? Because you're raising a 2 million plus, like 2.5 million, 3 million seed round, right? And you already have some validation. You already have an MVP. And those larger seed funds usually like to see some validation, usually, right? Hopefully with this, you'll execute and hopefully get to product market fit and raise the Series A, right? I'll stop in a second, but I want to go through the different paths. Path number 2, B. Maybe again in the beginning, maybe you bootstrapped a little bit and raise some friends and family, maybe not. But the teams we see here are usually they go straight ahead to raise what we call an early seed round, right? You could call it a large pre-seed, but I call it the early seed round, right? Which is around a 1.5 million round. Let's call it a 1.5 million round, right? And here, yeah, you might be pitching angels. It's your first round. You might be pitching pre-seed funds like Latitud, but you're also probably pitching the smaller seed funds. But actually, you would probably want to pitch every seed fund, right? So again, smaller seed funds like smaller seed funds. I'm calling seed funds between 50 to 150 million plus, around 100 million vehicles, right? You might also be pitching funds with 500 million vehicles, but usually these rounds are too small for them. And here, these teams, what the main difference is, these teams are raising the seed round, pitching actual seed funds, institutional seed funds, with nothing, right? With an MP, well, sorry, with a usually with a PowerPoint or extremely early MVP, right? But we see founders going out and doing this, right? We see experienced founders saying, "Hey, I have an idea, I have a thesis, I have a PowerPoint. I think I have the chance to raise 1.5. I go out of the gates to the market to raise 1.5 and pitch seed funds. That's doable. Is it doable? It is doable, right? Usually, okay. Then you build your MVP. Then you try to validate your hypothesis, and yeah, you execute for whatever time with the hope you'll get to product market fit and a Series A. Can that happen? It can happen. Many times, what we see is that they need to raise a bit more money in the way there. Is it a bad thing? Not necessarily, right? Because maybe you diluted just 20% here, right? And maybe you raise a Series A, sorry, a little extension and you did 5% more or 10% more, right? But it's definitely different. And we'll talk about the trade-offs. Very quickly, there's a path C, which is basically the path B on steroids, which is, okay, someone that out of the gates with a PowerPoint goes out and raises a large seed, right? 2.5 million, 3, 4, 5, 6 million, whatever. This was a bit more common during the bull market, a bit more less common now. I've seen it in the last year, yes, a few times. I've seen Brinta raising 4 million out of the gates from Kasich and DST, early founding team at the local. There's a few cases, yes, but definitely harder in the bear market, and definitely I would say constrained, limited to very, very experienced operators or second-time founders with previous exits, right? Okay, what are the trade-offs? I'll finish here with this concept in a second. What are the trade-offs between path A and path B? Hopefully I got them here. I mean, I would say, is there a right path? Is there a better path? The answer is no. It really depends on the company, on the founders. I think especially on the founders, not only their previous experience, but especially their kind of risk reward profile and how do you like to build a business, right? And what type of investors you want to have on board. In the path A, the process, basically you're tranching your fundraising. You're saying, okay, I'm raising less money now that I have no validation, right? I'm raising less money, diluting less, validating the stuff. There's a high chance you won't validate what you thought and you'll need to iterate or even pivot hard. And then when you pivot and you validate that, then raise your seed round. So you're lowering your fundraising risk and you're hopefully having better alignment between you as founders and the investors. Why? Because it's very different to bring in with a PowerPoint an angel, an accelerator like YC, or a pre-seed fund that is happy, knows that you'll be this in discovery process, that you'll be building this very slowly, with doing things that don't scale, probably iterating harder or pivoting. It's very different to bring someone like that than bringing a multi-stage fund that will want to basically see you validate and grow very quickly, right? And we've seen it happening many times. We've seen PowerPoint founders bringing on large multi-stage funds, and there's trade-offs. And they're probably not funds that are experts in the 0 to 1. They're probably funds that are experts in post-PMF support, right? What are the cons? Probably slower, right? Yeah, you raise less money, you execute with less capital. Maybe if you have competitors, maybe they can outpace you. You're doing 2 races, right? Or 1 race and a half if you want, because the first one is more from angels to microfunds. And then potentially more dilution before Series A. Who knows, right? If you raised path B and then you had to raise an extension, maybe you're at the same level of dilution, right? And then path B, the pros, of course, is faster. Okay, I raised 1.5 million out of the gate. I can hire faster. I can build my MVP faster. I can move faster, right? Maybe you need it, right? Maybe you're building in an infrastructure play and you need to and your MVP cannot really be an MVP and you need more money. That happened to Pomelo, for instance. They couldn't do like a very kind of bare bones MVP, so they had to raise a bit more. And then, yeah, potentially less dilution, which again, the jury is out on that one. If you execute like a madman, maybe you'll go straight ahead from an early seed to a Series A, but that's not always the case. The cons, more fundraising risk. we'll talk about that in a second, because you might go out to the market with a PowerPoint and say, hey, I'm raising 1.5 at 10, and the market might say, we're not interested. You have no validation. Let come back when you have some early validation of what you want to build. We'll talk about that in a second, right? But definitely more fundraising risk. And the risk there is that you'll need to then, if you don't find momentum, you don't find demand, you'll need to go back to the market and say, hey, you know what? I'm not raising 1.5. I'm raising 600K at a 6, right? But then you probably burn some bridges on the way there, right? And the other, of course, con is raising too much too early. And there's a very bright crew here, and you'll get it. We've seen it in the bull market. There's many risks to that, right? Just bloating your structure, your team payroll, especially your structures, your costs too early. And we love that funny question, which is, can you raise, let's call it 3 million, and execute and build your company as if you had raised, say, 600K? I mean, it should be possible, like theoretically, and some people have done it, but it's hard, right? It's hard. Like, why? You just hire too much, trying to move fast before you have product market fit, before you can really scale. You start pursuing lateral projects, right? Maybe launching too many products like too early, and then the team also says, okay, you raise 3 million. I want to have a better pay. I want to have the ping pong table like the company next door that has the ping pong table, right? And again, this is not our experience, but our founders' experience that tell us this, right? But yeah, again, it's doable. Sometimes at seed, like the typical rule of thumb numbers, maybe you're doing, you have some monetization already. Maybe you're doing between 15 to 50K in MRR, maybe, but again, it depends. We've seen Series A companies raising Series A's with no monetization, right? Like literally. So I would say you have with some pilot customers, it depends if you're B2B, B2C, whatever. You have shown that there's market pool for what you're building, right? For that core product, and that you're getting feedback on that, whatever that is. It could be some retention numbers, and B, I would say that, and B, you have probably scoped out what the product looks like a bit better, so you have done product discovery in the streets, but again, metrics is like, it's hard for me to tell you what's the number of users, right? Because it really depends if you're selling enterprise, SMEs, or totally consumer play. Unit economics, hard to prove at that stage, at pre-seed, right? If you have some data, I think it could be extremely helpful, but it's hard, right? Because you're doing things without any scale, right? You could be building something literally super heavy ops, with a lot of humans in the loop, let's say limited software, just again validating the pain and the need for that product, right? So if you can, that's great. I would say probably more on the second side. I mean, you won't have proven product market fit by then, but you're probably showing A, the pool of the market, B, the usage, retention, the engagement levels, whatever that is. So that's my opinion. Yeah, growth ideally. But again, it depends, right? This is pre-seed. We're talking before you raise the seed, right? Maybe you're just working with 5 pilot users, Let's say you raised your pre-seed and you're getting to your seed range, right? Okay, what's the round size? The way we look at it, and you can have people having different takes on this, but the way we see this is, okay, you actually look at your capital requirements, what's your minimum base case number for the next 18 to 24 months? If you can look at 36, that's ideal, but I would say 24, right? With as a rule of thumb. And basically we encourage you to go there with not with your ideal size of raise, but with your base number, right? Why? When you put in a deck, we encourage you not to put your valuation in your deck, but just put the round size. Any fund looking at that, they will say, okay, they're diluting around 20%. So they'll just take an immediate valuation range, right? If you're going out with a 4 million valuation, they're assuming you're trying to raise at 20, right? If you're going out with a 2 million valuation, they'll assume you're going to raise at 10, right? And what we believe is that it's way better to start smaller, and it's always 2 million plus. So that's my point to John's comment, right? I'm raising a 2 million plus round, right? You can actually have the plus on the deck, but funds know this. Funds know that if you are successful with your raise, you will end up raising more than your target. They know it. And probably in the vast majority, anyone that makes an offer to you and you end up telling them, hey, you know what? I went out to raise 2 million. We have 3 million on the table. So you know what? We'll raise more. We'll strengthen our balance sheet. We'll raise our cap not to dilute too much. We'll raise 3 out of 15. They'll probably have more FOMO and be more inclined to invest in you, right? Even if you're raising the cap, right? And we saw this, some radical cases during the bull market. But at the very least, I've seen it time after time, founders being able to negotiate 15, 20, 30% upwards in the valuation, right? So we think the worst kind of alternative is to go out and ask for 4. Don't get any demand. I just went through this a couple of minutes ago, but again, don't get any demand because the funds don't even engage with you. When some will, some won't, right? But and then I have to backtrack and say, you know what? I'm not raising 4 million. I'm raising 2 million. So again, we always say try to build, start smaller and build upwards. Hopefully that makes sense there. So again, the final capital needs the baseline raise, target dilution, and then that funds the valuation range, and that should, but the market demand is the one that is actually setting valuation, right? You're not setting the valuation, I'm sorry to say, unless you have a yeah. This is the kind of the other on the right here, the other comment, right? Which is maybe John, you were referring to that, right? You can reward early risk takers. If you're going out to raise a round, you could definitely tranche between that round, like, because again, if it's a safe round, it's all seed funding, right? You need to be careful, always respect kind of the chronological order, don't do radical things, but you can easily say, okay, I'm going out to raise my seed round. I'll raise 200K from angels at a, let's say at an 8, and after that I'll be increasing the remaining 1.5. I'll be raising that at a 10, right? So that is doable. That you can do that, and that's part of the game. And no one should none of the large funds investing in the second tranche should be offended, nor worried, nor concerned that you raised at a lower cap from angels maybe a month and a half ago, right? We've seen this time after time. So a little bit of the kind of the playbook, and this is quite simple, right? And again, many of you are experienced, but this is sharing what we saw time after time. You're trying to convince people to do something extremely risky, which is invest in an early stage startup in Latin America, right? And we always say, okay, if you were to, as an analogy, you're trying to convince people to climb the Aconcagua with you. With whom should you start? With whom would you start, right? And I always say, like, I would start with my friends, A, my closest friends, B, the craziest of my friends, the most risk taking of my friends, right? And that's the way you should do this too, right? So angels are usually the ones playing the riskier game, right? Why? Because that's the game. They invest very early, their own money. Do you have any angel? Do you have angels that invest in Series A, Series B? Yes, of course. But usually angels like to, meet the founder extremely early, put 5, 10, 20K at play at a low valuation, right? And they're usually willing to take more risk, right? That's the game they're playing, right? And in most of the cases, angels are weird because it's harder to get at them. I mean, you might know a few, but there's no really good database of angels. Why? Because it changes all the time. Like this guy, let's say, I don't know, whatever, the founder of OutZero, who lives 2 blocks away from me. Maybe at that moment he's not investing in anymore because he just bought an apartment. Who knows? Maybe he doesn't have liquidity. Maybe he got sick of this. So you never know, right? So it's hard harder to get at them versus VCs that the VCs that have money, they need to have a mandate to deploy it, right? But on the other hand, if you get to angels, usually after one call, they should be able to tell you, hey, I'm down, I want to do this, let's do it, and wire and sign a safe, or I'm not interested, right? So usually they can commit quite quickly. Very importantly, angels can usually help you spread the word out, right? They're a distribution channel towards VCs, right? They're a key signal. If you're building let's call it a company in education, and you have Gina as an angel, even though now she's a GP at Latitud and she's not angel investing anymore, you're providing any other downstream VCs with a signal that, okay, if Gina's investing here, and she knows quite a bit about consumer ad tech, this team might be should be building something interesting, and let's take a look at it, right? And again, like angels, there's more availability of them. Latam, we're still way behind than in the US, and the bear market, of course, like reduced the number of angels out there. And there's definitely varied commit levels or check sizes. Some of them do 5, 10, some of them like doing bigger checks. But I will always start from low hanging fruit, the craziest and the closest, and then build up, right? If you have your friend that is a Series A founder, go and get him first. Then if he introduces you to that Series B founder, pre-IPO founder, that pre-IPO founder will look and will say, okay, he has this Series B or Series A founder in his capital, he might be up to something, right? And then of course, this is obvious, try to get people that have either experience in your vertical or in your business model, not only as advisors, but also to provide that signal towards those VCs, right? This is again super tactical, but I think it's important to frame it. How to get interest, right? You've probably heard about the blurb idea. This is the very basic fundraising material, but that you need to have it. Basically, one paragraph on the company, what you're building, one paragraph on the team, on the founding team, crucial at this stage. Send that to your angel over WhatsApp or over email. And it's always double opt-in, right? If the angel makes the intro, the fund or whatever needs to say, yes, I'm down to meet them. What I usually say is, okay, I send it over email, and then the angel should add on the email, on the body of his email, whatever. Yeah, you should talk with these guys because this founder, I've known him for 15 years and I've never seen him as good as an executor as this guy or girl. I mean, something you wouldn't say yourself, right? So that's obvious. And then the fact that if multiple people ping the same fund, that helps. That's important. Actually, that's very efficient, I would say. If there's 2 or more people pinging that fund, people that respected by that fund, that's usually very helpful, right? Because it's again in the signal to noise ratio, it just puts you higher in that noise map, if that makes sense. Ideally, if you can get to a partner or above, right? In terms of them hearing about you. And then we're getting into this kind of the core part of the playbook, and this is it's weird, right? Because fundraising, it's a type of, it's kind of a sales process, but it's a weird one, right? In a B2B sales process, the buyer shouldn't care if the buyer next door is about to buy your software product or whatever, right? In this case, and many of you know it already, some of you might not, each VC cares about what other VCs think and are about to do. It's a FOMO game. It's a game of competition and competitive dynamics, right? So that makes things harder, I would say, or tricky, right? The key thing here is the following. Don't fundraise over long periods of time. Just don't do it, right? There's 2 types of talks with VCs, right? Let's say, I don't know, who's not fundraising yet here. Let me look at a face. I don't know, Luis Betega. If someone says, hey, Luis, I want to connect you to Lightspeed Ventures or whatever, General Catalyst, Founders Fund, QED, would you take the call? You're not fundraising yet. Would you take the call? Yes or no? You would?
Yes.
Cool. But I think the key thing here is telling that fund, hey, I'm not fundraising yet. This is not a pitch. I'm not talking to funds. I plan to fundraise in 2 months, in 2 quarters. I'm taking the call because this mutual connection said I should and spoke very highly of you. I'll I want to meet you, get to know each other, so you know me and you understand what I'm about to build or building. I want to ask questions in this type of meetings. I want to hear what you did QED in my space. What do you think about my space? Have you done any investments? What do you like to see in terms of KPIs to invest in a seed round or in a Series A, whatever, right? But that's very different to pitching someone and expecting actually that once you pitch someone, that fund should have an internal process that they should provide you with an answer in certain amount of weeks, right? And they'll be looking at, okay, what type of process is this fund running, right? So going one step ahead, what you need to do is really plan ahead. You know that phrase, I think it's Lincoln, like sharpen the axe for, I don't know, like 3 days and then chop the tree in 3 hours, right? Don't go and go with an unsharpened axe and take 3 days to chop the tree down, right? So really build your CRM, right? Build your funnel, do the research, understand who invests in your vertical in Latin America, at your stage, and try to map out, very importantly, who can connect you to those funds, right? Maybe have a direct connection from your previous experience. Otherwise, try to see which of your previous angels or friends or advisors, or again, any previous investors can make the intro to those funds, right? On the plan, ideally, this is a nice, like this is a kind of a ideal scenario. It's hard to execute, but this is what you should be shooting for. The ideal case is, okay, 1st of March, I'm opening my fundraising round. Basically, I'm opening my round. I stopped doing pre-marketing, and I'm now marketing my round to the funds, right? This is especially relevant for funds, not that relevant for angels. With angels, you can be a bit more organic because in the end, it's folks, people, individuals. So again, here, the goal is to try to have first calls with funds as condensed as possible in 2 or 3 weeks, I would say, right? This is hard because someone will say, hey, I'm on vacation. Let's schedule for the first week of the next month. And that will happen, but you should be shooting for trying to have all the pitches as close as possible, right? So how do we do this? You line up all the warm intros and trying to get those intros in 1 day. Again, hard in one, 2, 3 days. So you can book those calls for a few weeks. I will talk about the waves in a second. But the idea here is basically, let's talk about the waves now, if you want. Angels was the first wave. Even if you went through path B and you didn't raise a pre-seed, you're going straight ahead to raise a seed round, you can talk to angels first. I would talk to angels first, even before I talk to VCs formally. Then this depends on the founder, but we think there's an argument to first pitching tier 2 leads and follower funds, getting commitments. Let's talk, I won't mention tier 2 leads, but let's mention a follower fund, FJ Labs, for instance. They're close friends to us. Great fund, marketplace investor globally. They don't lead rounds, right? They're a follower fund, but they tell you, hey, I love what you're doing. Hopefully they tell you, I love what you're doing. I love your thesis, the team, whatever. We're down. We want to invest 400K, but we need a lead at whatever terms this lead sets, right? There's different versions of this, but just to give you an example. So why do we like starting with tier 2 leads and follower funds first? To stack up commitments, A. So then when you go and pitch your dream investor, you are, hey, no, we started pitching 10 days ago and we're at 50% of our fund target, right? So you basically put the fire under their asses. And B, why else? Because you just hone the pitch. You get better at your pitch, like with funds that maybe are not your dream investors or tier 1 investors, right? So that's what we think. But somehow people say, hey, no, go and pitch your dream investor first, and then try to close one of those, and then you'll fill up the round with followers. It really depends on the founder, right? We think it's better to build momentum. Hopefully that makes sense. One last comment here. The best funds most of them don't like to get pulled into a process with no context of the team, right? So again, if we go back one slide, or 2 slides. We like the pre-marketing, right? We like, if you map out 5, 10 funds that you would love to have, meet them beforehand, right? 3 months, 6 months, try to get an intro and say, hey, I'm not raising, meet them beforehand so they can track you. And whenever they tell them, you tell them, hey, now I'm going out to raise, they can see the line between the dots, right? And you told them back then, hey, we'll be, when we go out to raise, we'll be at whatever, this traction level. Hopefully you're there already, and you see the line between, they see the line between the dots, right? The thing is, it's hard. You cannot test the waters. You cannot meet 50 funds because otherwise you're fundraising already. I usually say, hey, like pick a handful, 5, 10, 15, and meet them over maybe once a week, because you're remember, before you're raising your round, you're focused on building, right? Meet them, get to know each other, and then whenever you go to raise the round formally, yeah, they have pre-existing contacts with you. Okay, I'm getting to the end of this monologue here, and I'll open up to some questions. Why the calendar density? Basically, the goal here is to generate a sense of urgency in the funds. Why? If you raise during 6 months and you talk with one fund here, one fund there, the funds know they'll optimize for optionality. They will just wait and see if your round gets hotter, but especially if you keep building and getting traction, right? Because they know they don't have to run after the deal because they won't lose it, right? On the other hand, if they know you're running a tight process and you're talking with 30, 40, 50 funds in the lapse of 2, 3, 4 weeks, they know they'll need to move fast, and the analysts will know that they need to bring this up to the partner, and the partners will know that they need to bring it up to the investment committee. Otherwise they'll miss the deal, right? So that's the way you ideally run an efficient fundraising process with seed funds. Is it easy? No. It's tricky. It usually takes a lot of focus from the CEO, maybe 80% of the focus of the time during that month and a half, 2 months, sometimes more. During the bull market, this happened faster. Right now, it's happening slower, right? It could be 3 months, it could be 6 months, it could be a year. I'm seeing a really good founder building a really good thesis, and he took a year to raise this. So yeah, again, the goal here is to drive those competitive dynamics, get funds to move you in their own internal pipeline and CRM, to prioritize you among other leads that they're looking at, and ideally to make an offer, right? To send a term sheet. And John, you were talking about this. If you get another important consequence, if you get only one term sheet because you talked with only one fund in 6 months, that's pretty good actually. But then you basically have no leverage, right? You have, it's either take it or leave it. It's one pájaro en mano, like one bird in your hand, like you'll probably take it. If you manage to run a tight process and you had multiple folks moving down the pipeline, and you manage to get one term sheet, what you usually do here, what we help founders do is, okay, one first term sheet, even if the terms are terrible, game on, right? There, you basically turn around and you tell any warm funds in your pipeline, hey folks, we got terms, we need to provide an answer in the next week. If you're interested, let us know. We'd love to partner up with you. You send them a personalized email, making them feel very special, of course, right? That's where you basically try to push them to send you more term sheets. And ideally, you end up that week or the whatever, those 2 weeks with more than one term sheet on the table. And of course, they're in a pretty good spot to have leverage and negotiate the terms up or whatever that is, right? So again, in our case, if you were raising 2 million and you end up having 3 million on the table or 4, you will probably be able to raise the size round, the round size and the valuation, among other things, and probably hopefully pick the best partner for you. Of course, economic terms are not everything. So yeah, again, that's our little playbook there.